Welcome to Lecture 5, Week 7, Training Program Design 5. Objective of Lecture 5 are to know training principle application in conditioning program design, to know different stimulation to apply for conditioning improvement, to know conditioning program guidelines. Outcome of Lecture 5 is to demonstrate design a conditioning program. You start designing a program by recollecting and reinforcing gas principle and principle of specificity. Let's start by applying gas principle concepts to conditioning program design. The first thing that you should remind yourself to apply gas principle is stimulation. Whether you are giving a stimulation in a given workout or in a given week, how much stimulation you are giving and what type of stimulation you are giving. Followed by how repeatedly you are giving this stimulation by implementing an optimal recovery parameters. Let's understand what are the different type of stimulation you can give to improve the conditioning fitness levels. These are a short HIIT, a long HIIT, a repeated sprint training, a sprint interval training, and a small sided game. So these are the different type of stimulation you can give to improve the conditioning levels. Recollect anaerobic and aerobic methods of training, which covers few of these types stimulation in details. The second concept to apply in program design is principle of specificity. First, understand how you can apply the specificity principle to improve the conditioning. If you are demanding your cardiovascular system to perform above lactate threshold cardio activity or sporting activity at a short interval, that is around 10 to 16 seconds, repeatedly for a prolonged interval, you will get an adaptation where your cardiovascular system will increase its ability to perform sporting activity at a higher lactate threshold with a short duration in nature but for a prolonged interval. And this ability is conditioning one type of fitness level improvement. In conditioning 1, you improve your aerobic capacity only. So conditioning, there are 5 different types of conditioning. So when you demand your cardiovascular system to perform cardio activity or sporting activity at a higher threshold, and the nature of your activity is of short interval but for a prolonged interval, for a prolonged duration, you improve your aerobic capacity to perform that sporting activity. When you demand, now if you want to increase the conditioning 2, which is improving your aerobic capacity plus your neuromuscular capacity, that is ability of your skeletal muscles to repeatedly fire and at a higher intensity, at a higher velocity. In order to improve conditioning to fitness level, you need to create a demand in your cardiovascular and muscular system to perform above lactate threshold and all out effort cardio and sporting activity at a repeated interval for a prolonged duration. So when you create this demand, your body's ability to perform a sporting activity at a higher threshold and with all out efforts repeatedly for prolonged interval increases. And this capacity is called as conditioning 2 capacity, where your aerobic capacity is improved and your neuromuscular capacity is increased. Because an all out effort demands your neuromuscular system to fire motor units at a higher frequency rate and to have a greater synchronization between the motor units. Only then your muscle would be contracted repeatedly and the all out efforts would be achieved. In conditioning 3, what you demand is you demand your cardiovascular system to perform above lactate threshold cardio or sporting activity at all out effort, but this activity work interval is in between 60 to 300 seconds. That is, it has a longer work interval duration, and you do it repeatedly and you do it for a prolonged interval. When your body would adapt, you would have an increased capacity to perform a sporting activity at higher intensity with a repeated bout, and the bout duration would be in between 60 seconds to more than 60 seconds in duration. When you improve this ability, you increase your conditioning 3 fitness level, which is characterized by greater aerobic capacity and greater anaerobic capacity. Now, if you want to improve your conditioning 4 fitness level, you have to create a demand in your cardiovascular and muscular system to perform a cardio or sporting activity at a higher lactate threshold levels repeatedly with a duration of up to 300 seconds, maximal and minimal 60 seconds, and at an all-out efforts. This demand would increase your cardiovascular and muscular system capacity to perform sporting activity with an all-out efforts and at a higher lactate threshold repeatedly with the work interval duration in between 60 to 300 seconds and for a prolonged interval. This adaptation would increase your aerobic capacity level, your anaerobic capacity level, and your neuromuscular capacity level, which is conditioning 4. Lastly, if you want to increase your conditioning 5 fitness, which represents a greater anaerobic capacity and a greater neuromuscular capacity, you have to create a demand in your cardiovascular and muscle system to perform sporting activity with an all-out efforts and at an interval with a duration in between 60 seconds to 300 seconds for a prolonged interval. This demand will create an adaptation by increasing the cardiovascular and muscular system's ability to perform a sporting activity at all-out efforts with an interval in between 60 to 300 seconds repeatedly for a prolonged interval. So obviously conditioning 5 is much more demanding in compared to conditioning 4, conditioning 3 or conditioning 2. In conclusion, principle of specificity requires you to match the demands with an expected adaptation, that is the fitness level that you want to improve. Let's map the conditioning stimulation with the conditioning, different types of conditioning fitness. What I mean is, what type of stimulation is required to give to improve what kind of conditioning. Now, conditioning is definitely a much more complex type of fitness variable in compared to the power or simple cardio or muscular strength fitness level improvement. So it's important that you are aware how do you map different type of stimulation to different type of conditioning levels improvement. So if you want to improve conditioning 1, you use short HIIT. If you want to increase conditioning 2, you would use short HIIT and small sided game type of stimulation. If you want to increase conditioning 3 fitness level. You use short HIIT, long HIIT and small sided game. As a stimulation, if you want to increase conditioning 4, which represents aerobic system, anaerobic system and neuromuscular system development, then you use 4 different types of stimulation. That is short HIIT, long HIIT, small sided game and repeated sprint training. And at the last, if you want to increase your conditioning 5, which represents anaerobic system and neuromuscular system, then you use repeated sprint training and sprint interval training type of stimulation. So in summary, there are 5 types of conditioning to target and improve. Conditioning 1 represents to improve aerobic system only. Conditioning 2 targets anaerobic system and neuromuscular system. Conditioning 3 targets anaerobic system and aerobic system. Conditioning 4 targets aerobic system, anaerobic system and neuromuscular system. Conditioning 5 targets anaerobic system and neuromuscular system only. Map stimulations with target conditioning to get the improvement in desired sport specific conditioning. It means that first you have to find out what conditioning types you need to improve, and this can be answered considering what are the conditioning demands for the given sports. Once the target is set, the next part of program design is you need to map the appropriate stimulation with the target conditioning you want to improve for the desired sport. Thank you.